Hey, you teach your teens about manners. You teach them how to have a good face-to-face, in-person conversation. But have you taught them about good cell phone manners and specifically texting etiquette? Teen expert Kristen Duke is joining me today to share questions parents can ask to help kickstart that conversation about texting and ultimately about respect. Hi, Kristen. Welcome to Studio 5.
Hey, nice to see you again.
So listen, my dad every year for Christmas, well, not every year, but every few years would give me the updated Emily Post etiquette book, and I loved it. I still have them stacked on my coffee table at home, and I'm sure there's been books written with a more modern spin, but this becomes sort of that modern version of that timeless conversation. Text etiquette, you say it's a thing, and you say it's something parents should be addressing.
It definitely is something that needs to be addressed. It's something that our teens are doing on a regular basis, and they need to be taught, just like they need to be taught manners at the dinner table, all the other kinds of etiquette as well.
Yeah, so if my friend already had, or if my child already has a phone, kind of cat's out of the bag, is it too late to jump in with these principles and these essentially values, right? You're communicating your values through your communication too.
Right. No, it's never too late. I think some people come in later and they realize, oh, I never really stopped and talked with them about how to respond or response time. And I think just saying, hey, you know what? I kind of wish that I would have talked about this a little bit earlier. Are you okay if we talk about it now and just discuss some different ways that you can do things in the future?
I like that approach too, because I think the world moves so quickly. Sometimes we try to weave in lessons as we go, but this seems like one of those conversations you could just have directly, distinctly, make it a point, make it a priority. You've got a series of questions that will help us sort of soft shoe in or open the door toward this etiquette conversation. First, when a text comes through, do you feel like you have to respond right away?
Right. You know, our teens, ourselves, we're all kind of conditioned to, oh, I need to respond because somebody sent me a message. And you can say, you know, I get that you want to respond, but you don't want it to be the Pavlov's dog, right? You want to teach them it's okay to not respond right away, to think about what you want to say and to just give some time. And I think they kind of need that permission or need to be told it's not necessary to be done right away.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be knee-jerk. Not that every text is loaded or emotional, but there's wisdom, right, in sitting back and sitting on it for just a little bit. I like that question for adults, too, by the way. Question number 2,
Yes.
Have you ever been in a situation where you are with a friend and they're texting someone else? This sort of frames them as the observer. That's smart.
Yes, and it's tricky. And so, yeah, like how does it make you feel when you're with a friend and they're responding to someone else, and helping them tap into those emotions will hopefully help them to remember in the future when they have a text come through, A, you don't have to respond right away, and B, oh, I want to be present here with the friend that's here. And there's something different if you're waiting for a text, or you know, you're expecting something and telling your friend, hey, I'm actually waiting for something, just so you know, I'm going to be checking to see if my mom reaches out or something like that. But yeah, generally speaking, don't carry on a conversation with another friend when you're
Right.
present with one friend.
Right. This next question kind of strikes at interesting timing. At our house, we just had a conversation with my 7-year-old about gossip, like defining what that is and explaining how that can play out in little girl friendships. But growing it up a bit, this next question kind of speaks to that. What would you do if you were in a group text and someone said something unkind?
Right. And this is a situation where, you know, I bring up a lot of these questions and I say, in your mind as the parent, you see the right and wrong, but you want to help them to see it. You don't want to point out this is wrong, this shouldn't be done. But it's like, yeah, what would you do? What would you think? And sometimes it's not always to be that easy to be that upstander and saying, hey, you shouldn't do that. And so it helps them to think about, you know, it's likely that it's going to happen in the future. Think about what will you do when, to help kind of play out. It's almost role playing for, you know, how they can respond. And maybe it's talking through, well, here's a couple of ideas when I've encountered it or when I've seen it. Even adults, you know, it's going to happen there too. And just saying, you know, maybe you can pipe in and say something positive about the person, or you know, maybe you could send them a one-on-one conversation and say, I'm sorry that you know, that's happened, or talk to somebody who's saying it and just say, I don't appreciate it. And sometimes it's hard to know exactly what to do, but laying out a few different options to help them think about what they can do in the future when they're in that situation.
I think role playing is such a valuable tool as a parent for children of any age. So I love that you're inserting that into this topic. And also I was thinking, Kristen, when you and I were young, we'd talk about like verbally in person standing up for someone if something negatively was said about someone who wasn't there. There's something I think even more courage required when it comes to like typing out that defense. You know what I mean? Like putting it in writing.
Yeah.
But I like your ideas of kind of ways to kind of, you know, maybe one-on-one with them on the side. There are ways around it, but it does take a courage. It does take a bravery to stand up for someone who's not in the conversation, whether it's virtual or in person. All right, your next question. If you are, let's see, oh no, this speaks to what not to do. What to do if an acquaintance is texting you over and over and you don't feel like engaging. This is maybe when not to reply, right?
Right. And that's tricky too. It's just, it goes back to that very first question of you don't have to respond right away. And, I've seen instances with my kids where there is another person texting them that I would be annoyed, like, where are you? Why aren't you responding? And that's another good way of saying, hey, don't do this. But I mean, just saying, hey, you don't have to respond. And you can politely say, I don't feel like chatting right now. Or even if it's like a day after day thing, say,
Yeah.
I just help them talk through just saying, hey,
Say something.
maybe fewer texts or something
Yeah,
would be
help
better
them
for
say
me.
something. Does punctuation, does grammar have a role in this text etiquette conversation, in your opinion?
It's so tricky because teens are not interested in the grammar
Yeah.
and the punctuation.
Yeah.
And for myself, I kind of think it's not that big of a deal. I know some people want to help them to know the difference. I've seen my kids do seem to know the difference when they're writing a paper for school. But personally, I'm not as concerned if they don't use etiquette, but I can see why some parents might be and they might want to encourage it. So either way it goes.
These final questions, again, just an opportunity to role play and to help them know how to handle it. How would you approach a text conversation with a friend you felt frustrated with? And finally, when someone texts you a long message, how do you reply? Ultimately, Kristen, as we talk through and work through these 8 questions, what's the goal here? What do you hope is the outcome of this kind of conversation parents could have with their kids?
I mean, it expands into the friendship thing, right? If they're frustrated with a friend, how would you respond in person? I feel like I want to teach my kids to advocate for themselves and not just get walked all over,
Yeah.
and to be able to, speak up. And,
Sure.
and the same thing goes in the texting realm, and just saying, if you're having a text conversation and you're frustrated with something, there is a nice way of saying, I don't appreciate that, or that hurts my feelings. And it's not easy in person. It's not easy over text. And at the same time, we want them to learn these rules of life and just communicating patterns. And, texting is communicating. It's not something that we didn't have. We didn't have it when we were
Right.
younger, but it is a
Right.
form of communication. And even though some people think it's not the same as talking, these kids are expressing a lot of feelings and emotions. They find it easier to express
Yep.
via text. So they might be doing more than they would at a younger age than even we did at that
Yeah.
age talking. So
Sure.
it's great to help them talk through and work through their own emotions that will help them better communicate it eventually someday too.
Good points, Kristen. Where can we hear more from you?
Well, I'm at Kristen Duke Chats on Instagram, and I love to help parents just think about the conversations and how to be more trusted by their teens, or KristenDuke.com is my
All right.
website.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.